Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, it's never enough? You give your best at home, at work, in your church. Yet something inside whispers, you should have done more. You smile, serve, and stay strong. But deep down you're tired. Tired of being everything for everyone. Tired of pretending that strength means silence. Tired of carrying the weight of perfection that no one else seems to notice, but you feel it every single day. So many women live like this, measuring their worth by what they do instead of who they are. They love deeply, they give endlessly, but they forget that even God rested. They pray for others, they hold their families together, they show up for everyone. Yet when the day ends, they wonder, who's holding me? The truth is, you were never called to be perfect. You were called to be present. Perfection was never a requirement for holiness. Only love was. Today, we'll talk about the weight of expectations, how it crushes, how it blinds, and how, by God's grace, it can be lifted. Because you don't have to carry everything alone. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone, not even to heaven. There's a gentler way to live, a holier kind of strength, and it begins when you learn to lay the burden down. And before we begin, let me ask you something important. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever tried to hold everything together while falling apart inside, this message is for you. Take a moment now and subscribe to this channel. Here, we walk through stories of redemption, faith, and the quiet power that rises when women of God remember who they are. Stay until the end, because this time the lesson might not just change your day. It might set your soul free. It starts small, almost invisible. A quiet pressure to do a little more, to be a little better. A voice that says, if you truly love them, you'd do it all. And so she does. The woman rises early, serves tirelessly, and gives without measure. Every detail matters. Every mistake feels like failure. She prays while folding laundry, whispers scripture between tasks, and still believes she's not doing enough. It's the burden of perfection, the belief that holiness means exhaustion. But it doesn't. God never asked her to burn herself to prove her devotion. That's not sacrifice. That's self-erasure. The enemy's greatest lie is that she must earn what was already freely given. Grace. The life of a woman often becomes a performance she never auditioned for. She wears smiles as armor, hides her fatigue behind "I'm fine," and carries her worries beneath a well-pressed blouse. Her children see her strength, but not her tears. Her husband admires her devotion but misses the weight she hides. Her community praises her endurance, yet no one notices that her joy has been replaced by duty. That's the cruel trick of expectation. It rewards what slowly destroys. The more she meets every demand, the less she recognizes herself. And still, she presses on, convinced that love requires losing herself in the process. Somewhere along the way, her prayers change. They're no longer conversations, they're checklists. Lord, help me get through this day. Lord, give me strength to keep going. But when strength becomes her only prayer, she forgets to ask for peace. And peace is what she truly needs. Her heart begins to ache, not just from the weight of responsibilities, but from the absence of rest. She mistakes fatigue for failure, silence for distance, imperfection for sin. Yet the scriptures whisper a different truth. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9. But she's too busy striving to hear it. In her pursuit of perfection, even faith starts to feel like pressure. Church becomes another place to perform. Ministry turns into obligation. Every mistake feels like a mark against her holiness. She looks at others who seem at peace and wonders what's wrong with her. But here's the secret. Nothing's wrong with her. She's just forgotten the rhythm of grace. The same God who formed the stars never asked her to shine nonstop. He delights in her stillness too. The weight she feels isn't divine expectation. It's human misunderstanding. She carries crosses that were never hers to bear. And maybe that's where freedom begins. When she finally admits she's tired of trying to be perfect. When she allows her trembling hands to let go. Because holiness was never about spotless performance. It was about humble presence. God doesn't look for flawless hearts. He looks for honest ones. The woman burdened by perfection doesn't need to become stronger. She needs to become still. The grace she's chasing has been beside her all along, waiting for her to stop running. And when she finally pauses, breathes, and whispers, "Lord, I can't do this alone." Heaven answers, "You were never meant to." The cost of carrying too much isn't always visible. It shows in quiet ways. In the way her laughter becomes shorter. In the way her prayers feel like work. In the way she forgets what her own voice sounds like when she's not saying yes to someone else. Every day, she moves through life like a vessel running on fumes, convincing herself that grace will meet her once the to-do list is done. But grace doesn't live at the end of her effort. It lives in the middle of her chaos. The Lord doesn't wait for her to be finished to meet her. He meets her right there, in the noise, in the mess, in the sigh she exhales between tasks. But she can't see that yet. All she sees is what's left undone. At home, the signs are everywhere. The family loves her, but they also miss her, even when she's sitting right beside them. Her children sense her presence but not her peace. Her husband watches her drift through the motions with a gentle kind of helplessness. The warmth that once filled the home has dimmed, replaced by the tension of exhaustion. And yet she keeps going, believing it's what love requires. The difficulties of womanhood are often praised as strength, but sometimes strength becomes a disguise for suffering. She's learned to bear everything, but not how to rest in anything. That imbalance starts to bleed into her soul. Spiritually, the disconnection deepens. She opens her Bible but finds her mind wandering. She bows her head in prayer, but only feels the weight of silence. Her faith begins to taste like obligation. Bland, heavy, routine. She wonders why she can't feel God anymore, but he's not gone. He's just waiting behind the noise. True hesychasm, true stillness, can't live in a heart that never stops striving. The silence she once feared has turned into her teacher. It whispers that not everything broken can be fixed by effort. Some things can only be healed by surrender. Doubts creep in like shadows. Maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I'm not strong enough. Maybe God's disappointed. But that's the lie that fuels her burden. God doesn't measure worth in output. He measures it in openness. Her constant giving, without receiving, has created a wound that only grace can close. The redemption she needs doesn't come from doing more, but from remembering she's already loved. When she begins to believe that, the pressure starts to lift. Slowly, gently, like dawn breaking through fog. And so the woman who once thought she had to hold everything together begins to loosen her grip. The dishes can wait. The emails can wait. Even the ministry can wait. What can't wait any longer is her heart, because when the heart finally rests, everything else falls into place. She begins to see her reflection again. Not the perfect version she imagined, but the human one. The one God called good long before she learned to doubt it. And in that moment of surrender, the weight she carried for years doesn't vanish, but it no longer defines her. There comes a moment when her strength runs out, not because she stops believing, but because she's been believing with empty hands. She sits alone one night, surrounded by the quiet hum of a house finally asleep, and wonders, why do I feel so far from the God I've been serving? That question isn't rebellion, it's exhaustion. She's poured her soul into faith, but forgot to let faith pour back into her. The prayers feel hollow. The scriptures blur together. The worship songs don't reach her heart anymore. And that's when the guilt hits. Because how can someone who loves God this much feel so disconnected from Him? It's the breaking point of perfection, when even faith begins to feel like failure. But failure is not what God sees. He sees a woman who's been trying too hard to carry what only He was meant to hold. He sees a daughter who's been striving to earn what was already hers, love. The silence she mistakes for abandonment is really an invitation to stop doing and start being. The life of faith was never meant to be a constant climb. It was meant to be a rhythm of giving and receiving, of working and resting, of speaking and listening. And when she finally collapses into that rhythm, when she stops trying to prove her worth, the weight she's carried begins to loosen its grip. This is what redemption looks like. Not perfection restored, but peace rediscovered. Her family starts to feel it too. The air at home softens. The small moments, her child's laughter, her husband's quiet gratitude, her own breath, begin to feel sacred again. She learns that holiness isn't in how much she does, but in how present she is. The hesychasm she once lost returns, not as silence, but as peace that fills the noise. And in that peace, She hears the voice she's been missing all along. Gentle, but unmistakable. You don't have to hold everything together. I already am. It's not a thunderclap. It's a whisper. But it's enough to heal the weary corners of her soul. And maybe this is what freedom truly means. To serve without losing yourself. To love without emptying your heart. To live without performing for heaven. God never asked her to be flawless. He asked her to be faithful. And faithfulness sometimes looks like resting, crying, breathing. Sometimes it looks like saying no. Sometimes it's just sitting quietly, knowing he's still there. The difficulties of a woman's life will always come, but they no longer own her. Because she's learned the truth hidden beneath the weight. Grace was never a reward. It was always home. Maybe the greatest strength a woman can have is the courage to rest, to stop chasing perfection, to let the dishes wait, to leave the phone unanswered, to sit in silence and know she is still loved. For so long, she believed her worth depended on how much she gave, but God never measured her by her output, only by her heart. The hands that never stopped working were meant to be lifted in prayer, not chained by expectation. And when she finally lets go, when she whispers, "I can't do this alone," that's when heaven smiles and answers, "You were never meant to." This is where redemption begins, not in doing more, but in daring to be still. To breathe again, to believe again, to remember that grace was never something to earn. It was always a gift to receive. The life of a woman will always hold difficulties and doubts, but they no longer need to define her, because now she knows, even in imperfection she is seen. Even in silence she is loved. Even in weakness she is holy. So if this message spoke to your soul, if you saw yourself in her story, don't leave without taking a step of faith. Subscribe to this channel and walk with us as we explore what it means to live freely in God's grace. Here you'll find stories of faith, redemption, and quiet transformation. Because you were never meant to carry the world alone. You were meant to live lighter, to love deeper, to rest in Him. And as you close this video, take one slow breath, lay down the weight, and feel what's been there all along. The gentle weight of grace.